Good morning. We begin our program this morning talking about measles. The disease, considered eradicated in the United States back in 2000, is back. A child in Texas infected with measles died 2 weeks ago. Over 100 people in Texas have contracted it, and there have been cases in 10 states, the closest being New York. Here to talk about how concerned we should be is Dr. Ulysses Wu. Dr. Wu is the chief epidemiologist at Hartford HealthCare. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been kind enough to join us in the past when we're talking about some of these disease things, COVID and other things. How concerned should we be, Dr. Wu?
Well, there's a difference between, I'll say, concerned and worried. And so I think the concern is legitimate, but in terms of panic and worry, we're not quite there yet. And I'll start with that answer first because we happen to be in a state where we have high vaccination rates. And so not only are we protected by our own individual vaccination or natural immunity if we were born before 1957, we are also protected by what we learned during COVID, the herd immunity. And so from that standpoint, we are protected, but we should be, I guess, we should keep an eye on this disease because it's not just this disease, measles, that we should be worried about, but also other diseases that could be coming down the road, all of which are preventable because of vaccines.
So let's talk about the prevention piece of this. So you mentioned one group, the people born before 1957. I know part of how you should respond if you are worried, or maybe if you're somewhere other than Connecticut, that concern might depend on which of those groups you're in. Can you break down the groups and what they sort of mean for people?
Yeah, I think the biggest group that we have to worry about is the unvaccinated, for whatever reason that they are unvaccinated. This is a disease that, as you've mentioned, it has come back. I call it a zombie disease. It was once a dead disease, and it was perfect for eradication because humans are really the only reservoir available. But because of its circulating strains around the world and because of low vaccination rates, the unvaccinated should be worried about, should certainly be one group. Then there are those who are partially vaccinated. Now, getting a partial vaccination, which means one shot, will give you a good amount of protection, but it won't protect you 100%. And so that's another group that we have to worry about. A lot of these people that fall into this are actually kids because they have not met the whole vaccination series yet. And then finally, we have the immunocompromised or the elderly. 2 doses of the vaccine should really protect you for life. But for the most part, if you are undergoing things which may make you immunocompromised, or let's say that the your protection wanes over time to a certain extent, you're not 100% protected. I think you're still very well protected if you've gotten both shots, but there are certain populations that may want to think about getting that second shot, or getting a booster, I should say.
Are you hearing concern, maybe from people who haven't heard the explanation you just gave? I've heard anecdotally that primary care offices are getting calls from people saying, hey, I've been seeing this on the news. Should I come in for a booster? Do you get the feeling at Hartford HealthCare in your practice around the hospitals that there is a worry that's leading people to say, hey, doc, I think I need some advice here?
Yeah, I love the fact that people are vested in this, and I don't want them to panic. And I think making those calls is perfectly fine just to make sure. And I think a lot of them are just kind of dotting their I's and crossing their T's and making sure that we're in a good place. And for the general population, if you have received 2 shots, 2 of the vaccines, you should be good.
All right, well, that's a simple, easy advice. You mentioned that the group that you're worried about, if there's a group like that, it's the unvaccinated, and one group of unvaccinated is babies. So what about people watching our show this morning who have a baby, a child under 12 months old, who hasn't yet even started the MMR vaccines? Would you have any advice for them and how they should proceed here?
Well, certainly, it's one of those things that you get the vaccines when you can, and whenever you can get those vaccines, that is the best. We don't want to put people in a bubble, but you do want to. A lot of these diseases, such as measles, are usually associated with travel or people who have traveled. And so you do want to make sure you put yourself in situations where you may not expose yourself. And so that would be things like international travel or being with people who have traveled internationally who are not vaccinated and especially sick at that point. But I think they can still they can adhere to their normal vaccine schedule without having to go, protect protect yourself by limiting where you go and things like that. You just really want to use common sense in those situations.
How about what you'll be looking at? I mean, you probably, we've all been seeing the news, and that's part of why we wanted to have you on. But I suspect as you read these headlines, it means a little something different to you given your background. So what will be the markers, or is it expansion to more states? Is there a point where if you see this, you'll say, ooh, that's getting bad? What will you be watching for?
Well, certainly the expansion of states, and it's been said already that outbreaks happen every year. Well, it does happen to a small extent, but not to the extent that we are seeing now. And as you already had mentioned, we've had our first, death in a decade. So uh, that is unfortunate. And so what we will be looking at is the spread of the cases. And you had mentioned New York. There's actually Rhode Island and New Jersey also have had their cases as well. And so a lot of this has to do with not just the cases, but how strong is our safety net? And that safety net goes back to vaccine or vaccination rates. It is a safe vaccine. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that is out there. But what we want to do is we want to get those rates up because, again, that's going to help improve your safety net and also improve that herd immunity. So yes, we will certainly, to answer your question, be following the case counts.
And just one last question for you. We have about a minute, little more than a minute left. Is it frustrating for you, given what you do for a living, that so much of your work is politicized at this point? And we see that, RFK Jr., in charge of the nation's health, has questioned vaccine safety. You've said several times, and I know the science bears this out, that these vaccines are safe. They don't cause autism. They don't cause other problems. That's just all bogus. Is that frustrating for you as you try to spread good information to people?
I wouldn't say that it's frustrating in that sense because you take everything with a grain of salt. You want people to be able to make those choices. But as we experienced during COVID, the problem is some of these choices will impact other people. And so in our lives, we make choices that will impact maybe only us. But this is something that could lead to the impact of other individuals. And as you said, the science is very sound out there. And it is a safe vaccine. It's a very effective vaccine. And it's a preventable disease. And I don't want to even go into the things where, there are complications associated with this that could kill you 7 to 10 years later after you've acquired measles, even if you've recovered from the initial illness. And so there are a lot of things out there that are very unfortunate, very preventable, and unfortunately due to misinformation.
Well, it is certainly a lot of information on this topic, and we so appreciate you being here once again to give us the facts and give people such great advice. Dr. Ulysses Wu, from the Chief Epidemiologist at Hartford HealthCare, thanks so much for being with us here on CT25.
Thank you for having me again.